Earth was just another target. A soft world on the Dominion's endless list. Another dirtball to break under orbital fire, then strip for resources until only bones and silence remained. But they never made it past the first wave. Humanity didn't just resist. They tore the first assault apart with weapons the Dominion hadn't seen before, kinetic rods that punched holes through destroyers, pulse cannons scavenged from broken alien tech, and something even worse. The second wave landed in the cities. They thought close quarters would favor them. It didn't. The streets became kill zones, the buildings turned into traps, and every shadow held a human with a rifle or a homemade plasma spear. Dominion Command tried to make sense of it, but no logic applied. These creatures fought without surrender. They fought like they knew what extinction tasted like and refused to taste it again. Now, the sky hung in ruin. Half-burnt Dominion wreckage drifted through the atmosphere, turning sunsets into sheets of crimson ash. The invaders' ground forces were scattered, their war beasts gutted, their armored regiments cut down to the last screaming officer. Humanity had rewritten First Contact into a massacre. But no one was celebrating. The humans knew something the Dominion didn't. This wasn't the final fight. This was only the opening move. And humanity wasn't stupid enough to think they'd won. Inside, a ruined orbital command post, salvaged from a Dominion dreadnought that humans dragged out of low orbit with steel cables and brute defiance, Commander Wraith studied the stars. His left arm was wrapped in a pressure cast after a Gauss round shattered the bone. His right hand gripped a tablet, streaming cracked intel feeds from across the planet. Every feed showed the same thing: the sky wasn't clear. Something else was coming. Something the Dominion hadn't sent, but feared just the same. The beacon they destroyed last night wasn't a distress signal. It was a warning flare, a message to something deeper in the void. And now it was coming. Wraith stared at the incoming contact, his breathing steady, his heart a hammer inside his ribs. The war wasn't over. It had just found its next gear. The atmosphere split open like torn fabric, and the first shard ships descended. Their hulls shimmered with shifting geometry, tech that bled into reality like a wound that couldn't heal. They weren't Dominion. They weren't anything Earth had a name for. Wraith slammed his fist into the alarm panel. Across every surviving bunker, war room, and trench, his voice broke through the static. Brace for hell. It's here. The sky screamed, the ground shook, and humanity's next battle began before the blood from the last one had even dried. Wraith's knuckles bled against the cracked metal of the alarm panel, but he didn't notice. His mind was already miles ahead, seeing the ground fracture under impact, hearing boots hammer the dirt, smelling the air turn sharp with ozone and burning flesh. The shard ships didn't land like transports. They crashed like weapons, stabbing themselves into the earth, breaking apart into smaller machines the moment they hit atmosphere. No ceremony, no demands. Just arrival and annihilation. Lieutenant Sarn was already pulling data feeds from the surface recon drones, her fingers flying over a console salvaged from Dominion wreckage, human code carved deep into alien circuits. She wasn't supposed to be here, a xeno-archivist turned war analyst, promoted by death and necessity. But no one else could read the shifting script crawling across the shard ship halls, language that pulsed like a living thing. She didn't know the full meaning yet, but she knew one word: reclaimer. Wraith didn't need translation to know what that meant. They weren't here to conquer. They were here to take back something. Something buried under Earth's soil, or maybe inside its people. The thought drilled into his skull, sharp and unwelcome. What the hell had humanity stumbled into? Corporal Drex leaned against the bulkhead, breath ragged, a blood-stained bandage tied around his throat. He was one of the first survivors pulled from the initial impact site, left with scars from Dominion plasma and something worse, a touch from the shard ship tendrils, a moment of contact that left his skin twitching like it remembered too much. He didn't talk about it. He just kept his rifle close and his eyes locked on the horizon, waiting for something he couldn't explain. Outside, the first ground forms crawled from the wreckage. Not machines, not flesh, something between. Spines that glowed with internal heat, limbs too long for their frames, mouths made for speech but twisted into constant, wordless screaming. They moved fast. Too fast. Faster than Dominion shock troops, faster than human reflexes. The first perimeter gun nests opened fire, and half of them jammed instantly metal, corroding in real time as the creatures approached, weapons turning into slag under their gaze. Wraith's comlink crackled with a half-dead signal. Sergeant Alina, somewhere near the eastern ridge, her voice carved down to raw instinct. Command, they're eating our tech. Every system they touch, it's like her voice cut out, swallowed by a burst of static. Then a scream cut short. Sarn's screen pulsed red. One word in alien script, repeating. Wraith didn't need her to translate. He knew what it meant now. Corruption. This wasn't a war. It was reclamation by infection. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to stay human. Wraith stepped out onto the platform, wind ripping past his face, the horizon glowing with unnatural light. The shard ships were unfolding, spilling their contents onto the world like a vein opened to the void. His rifle felt small in his hands. His fear felt even smaller. "Get me every off-book team we've got left," he said, voice low but sharp enough to cut through the chaos. The ones who don't exist on paper. The ones who don't ask questions. Sarn hesitated. "You think they can stop this?" "No." Wraith chambered around, the sound mechanical and final. "I think they'll make sure it hurts." Behind them, the largest shard ship split wide open, and something stepped out. It wasn't Dominion. It wasn't Reclaimer tech. It was older. Its eyes burned like collapsing stars, and its hands were already reaching toward the command post. Wraith didn't breathe. He just raised his gun and prayed it would matter. The trigger pull never came. The thing that stepped from the shard ship stopped halfway down the ridge, head cocked, eyes locked on Wraith like it recognized him. No reason it should. No way it could. But it did. And in that moment, Wraith's hand shook not from fear but from memory. Something buried deep, something they weren't supposed to know, something someone in command had sealed behind redacted files and dead witnesses. He didn't know how, but this wasn't first contact. Not for him. Sarn saw his hesitation and snapped. "Shit, damn it." He fired, full burst, every round hitting center mass. The thing didn't move. The rounds didn't drop it. They passed through, shattering into data stream fragments mid-air, like the laws of physics were getting rewritten between trigger and impact. Wraith swore and switched to the underslung plasma launcher, but even as he moved, his comlink crackled a new voice. No call sign, no identifier, just static and syllables carved from old fear. "Wraith, you opened the wrong door." His spine turned to ice. He knew the voice. Captain Holden, his old CO, from the Black Depths operation, a classified dig beneath a Dominion crash site 10 years back. Holden was dead. Wraith saw him die when the dig site collapsed. Except now, Holden's voice was on every channel, broadcasting wideband, bleeding through encryption like it was coming from inside the planet itself. Sarn grabbed his shoulder, yanking him out of the open as a spear of dark light sliced through the platform, melting steel like wax. "What the hell is this? Who's Holden?" Wraith didn't answer. There wasn't time, and even if there was, saying it out loud would only make it worse. Because Holden wasn't just his CO. Holden was the one who found the first shard. The one who swore they buried it under a kilometer of collapsed Earth and orbital debris, ensuring no one would ever find it again. Except someone did. Drex broke silence from his post, voice tight, teeth grinding between every word. "We got a fracture in the perimeter team. Some of the squads aren't firing. They're just standing there." Wraith's stomach dropped. Standing? Staring at the ships. Like they're hearing something we aren't. The signal cut through the comm again. Stronger, this time a pulse so deep it vibrated their bones. Carried on a frequency dominion tech couldn't detect, but human nerves remembered. It wasn't language. It was a call. And some of the soldiers were answering. Down in the trenches, Sergeant Alina was alive after all, but her rifle hung loose in her hands. Her eyes were black pupils, swallowed by something pouring from the shard ships into her mind. Her lips moved, shaping words that belonged to no human throat. When Drex screamed her name over the channel, she didn't even blink. Sarn slammed a fresh power cell into her sidearm. "This is turning into a mutiny." "No," Wraith corrected, jaw clenched. "It's a reclamation." Behind the ridge, the thing that looked at Wraith started walking again, this time toward the command post. Not fast. Not hostile. Just inevitable. "Drex, if anyone stops firing or starts talking to the air, you drop them." "No warnings. No hesitation," Drex confirmed, voice flat. Sarn turned to Wraith, voice low. "What aren't you telling me?" Wraith's gaze locked on the advancing figure. "Everything." Before she could reply, the platform buckled under a direct impact, and the shard ship's tendrils tore through the walls like paper. Wraith grabbed Sarn and ran just as Holden's voice whispered again, softer this time, but cutting deeper than any blade. "You shouldn't have dug." And from the ruins below, something human screamed, except it wasn't human anymore. The tendrils smashed through bulkheads and data relays, spraying molten metal and shredded wiring like arterial blood. Wraith shoved Sarn through the collapsing door, his back burning as a whip of corrupted alloy lashed across his armor, searing into the plating, whispering into his skin. It wasn't just heat, it was information. A flood of alien memory poured straight into his nerves. For half a second, he saw through the shard ship's senses, not metal or biology, but something older, something designed to remember worlds before they died. They hit the corridor floor hard, Drex hauling them up by their collars before the next impact shook the whole level sideways. His eyes were wide, too wide. Not from fear, from clarity. Commands gone. Every channel's either silent or screaming. He held up his slate, and Wraith saw the feed perimeter cameras showing soldiers dropping weapons, kneeling in perfect formation, as if welcoming something. No restraint, no hesitation. Worship. Sarn's hands shook as she tapped into the fragment of the alien language they'd decrypted. One word pulsed over and over across the feeds. Host. Wraith didn't need a translator. This wasn't just invasion. It was occupation of the flesh. The shard ships didn't come to destroy humanity. They came to wear it. But before he could process, before he could form a command, a secondary feed flickered into focus deep recon drone, far outside the battlefront, scanning a ridge where no shard ships had landed. At first, nothing. Then the ground split, and something crawled out, not alien, not machine. Human. wearing armor that predated the war, tech so old it belonged in a museum or a grave. "Identify that unit," Wraith barked, voice cracking against the rush of alarms. Sarn's face went pale. "That's Black Depth's division. Officially disbanded after the Holden dig." Drex stared at the feed, confusion knotting his brow. "That's impossible. They're dead." Wraith knew better. Not if they answered the call. The feed zoomed in, and Wraith's gut turned to stone. It was them, his old squad, the ones who never made it out when the dig site collapsed. Except they had. And now they were walking out of the earth like ghosts summoned by the signal. Their armor was scorched, faces locked in grim expressions, and their weapons. They weren't human tech anymore. Alien alloy fused into every rifle, every blade, as if the shard ships had remade them from the inside out. Before anyone could speak, the feed cut, replaced by Holden's voice, direct to their helmets, raw and bleeding across every channel. We were the first hosts. Wraith's heart pounded in his ears, louder than the explosions above, louder than the grinding metal. They hadn't just dug up alien tech back then. They'd opened a door and let something in. And now, every soldier who heard the call was becoming a part of it. Sarn grabbed his arm. "If it's a signal, we can jam it, cut off the infection." "No." Wraith's voice was a grave. "It's not a broadcast. It's a memory buried in human DNA since first contact. It's not controlling them." Drex's eyes narrowed. "Then what the hell is it doing?" Wraith looked down the corridor where his old squad would be coming soon. Caught between the living and the dead, between humanity and something far older. It's reclaiming them. And from the shadows at the far end of the hall, footsteps echoed too heavy for one man, too light for a machine. The first of the Black Depth squad stepped into view, helmet off, skin half metal, half bone. It was Holden. He raised his rifle, aimed it straight at Wraith's heart, and smiled.